In this video, I'm going to give you a quick introduction to the reporter package. And the first thing we'll do is look at kind of the simplest report possible. So in this first line here, I'm going to load up the reporter package. We're just going to use the empty cars data set. And in this next line, this is a pipeline, like a dplyr pipeline or a ggplot pipeline. And what's happening is we're creating a table object here in this first section of code, and then piping that to the titles function, which is accepting this table object as its first parameter, and then adding titles to the table object. And then likewise with the footnotes function here, it's accepting the table with the titles and then adding the footnotes. So this is a kind of additive syntax, very much like you would see in other R packages. All of that comes into this table variable here, and then that table variable is going to get passed to this next couple lines of code here where we create the report and then add that table to the report. And this line here is saying that I want to create this as the report name and that I want to put it out as RTF. And then this write report function actually writes out the report. So let's just run all this code. My output folder didn't exist, and so it created it. And here is the report. And it's kind of simple report of the cars data set. And the strength of this package is if I then wanted to put this out as PDF instead of RTF, I could do that just by changing this output type parameter. And there's the PDF version. It also supports DOCX and text and HTML. And this kind of fixed width report here is still very common in some companies. A lot of companies prefer it. Some companies don't. And so you might ask, well, is there anything I can do to spruce this up and make it better? And so the next example here, we'll take the exact same code, what we had here in the first example, except now we're going to add a font of Arial. And when we run this, we get the same report, except in Arial instead of the Courier. And it also supports times. If we wanted to run this in times, we can do that easily. Here. And then Courier, we can also run. But one thing to point out about the Courier, if you were to compare, in fact, let's just do it. Let's just compare this first one here to the second one. See, it's a little bit different. And what's different is that this is an actual table object, whereas this is kind of text dumped into the RTF. And that is done to maintain compatibility with the first version of this package, which only supported a fixed width text style report. In later versions, the package supported proportional fonts, and so that allowed us to get the full table object and the Arial and the times. And so just keep that in mind when you're producing reports with this package. If you want the full RTF code in an actual RTF table, then just make sure that you assign it a font. But there's more you can do with this package, and one of the things, a very valuable thing, is to create figures and text objects. So besides the table that we saw in the previous examples, I can also create figures and text. And you do that by creating a ggplot object just the way that you would do it normally in ggplot, and then pass that ggplot object into this create plot function and give it a height and width and then everything else is the same. For this figure, it is constructed exactly the same way we did with the table a moment ago, except now we're going to get a plot instead of a table. And there's one more type of content we can create, which is a text object. So here's some sample text, and I have this create text function here. I'm going to pass that text that I created here into this create text function, give that a width, and then again, everything else is exactly the same. And now I have a example 3b here with a bit of text and a title and a footnote. And so you might ask, why are these functions separate? The report creation is different from the content creation, which is different from the write report function. And one of the reasons is because that separation allows you to combine multiple pieces of content into the same report. So here's an example where we're going to get our data, create our table as we did in example 1, create our plot as we did in example 3, create our text as we also did in example 3. And now I'm going to put all three of those things, the table, the plot, and the text, onto the same report. And that's the reason all this is done separately. So you can get all those things onto the same report. And you'll see that with this add content function, I can decide whether or not I want a page break after that content is added. So on this first table here, I said I want to break the page after that content is added. And then on the plot, I don't want to break the page. And then after the text, I do. And if I were to run this, I would get a report with all three of those things in the same report. And my text and plot are here on the same page. So this gives you a lot of flexibility into how these reports are created, and you can actually create a very nice report with a lot of different analysis in the same document. Now, I showed you back in example 1 how you can switch back and forth between RTF and PDF or a different kind of output. There's another feature here I want to show you, which is that output type can actually be specified on the write report function. And this is one reason why the write report function is done separately, because I can take the same report object and spit it out in 5 different output types. So you can see all those output types coming up here. And if I were to open one, here's my HTML version. Notice that this is a paged HTML rather than just dumped into one HTML page. And that means if you were to print this thing, it would actually come up quite nicely. All your page breaks would be in the right spot. And here's the PDF with my 2 pages, my table, and my figure and text. And here's the DOCX with the same thing. So that's nice, but these examples aren't terribly realistic. Let's take a step towards a slightly more realistic report. In this last example, we're going to create a listing. And I'm going to use the full r-sassy system here. And the reason is because we're going to use some functions from some other r-sassy packages. This first one here is a libname. And when I run this, I am pointing to this directory data, which is located here. And you'll see when I run this libname function, I get all the data sets in this directory at once. And you can see how many rows and columns are on that, how big the file is, last time it was modified, and so forth. And I'm now going to create a listing with the ADVS dataset that's in that directory. And to do that, I just specify my libname here, $, the dataset that I'm looking for, pass that into my create table, create my titles. In this case, I added a function on here to identify this subject ID as an ID var, and that will put it as the first column on every page because this is a wide report. It's got 37 columns. They are not going to fit on one page. And so this ID var will help us identify rows across these different page wraps. And then I'm going to create my report just like before. This time I'm going to add a couple more functions for the page header and the page footer, and that will give us some information up in the header and footer of the report. And this is just some basic, dates, page numbering, and so forth. I added my content just like before. And before I write this report, I just want to remember that this is a 2,695 row data set. And I normally get about 45 rows per page. So 2,695 divided by 45. And we're expecting for 37 columns that this is going to wrap probably about 4 times. And so I'm going to take that approximately 60 pages and I'm going to multiply it by 4. And so we're going to get over 200 pages on this listing. And so it's going to take a little bit of time to write this report. And when you're doing these kinds of things, one thing you can do to save yourself some time is there's this preview parameter on the right report. And this is very valuable to reduce the cycle time when you're creating listings or very large reports. I'm going to run this with the preview of 1, meaning I'm going to get one section of this report. And then I'm going to look at this one. This is example 6. And so you see, I only got now 4 pages. I know it's going to be over 200 pages. But what this does is allows you to just look at it very quickly and make sure everything's coming out okay before you run all those 200 plus pages. And then one last comment. If you go out to the r-sassy website and then go to this gallery tab, there's a whole bunch of examples of different kinds of reports out here. Simple demographics, adverse events, different kinds of figures, patient profiles, disposition tables, in-text tables. And this is very handy when you're trying to learn how to use this package. You might be trying to replicate a report that you create at your company. And what you can do is find one on here that's similar in some way to the thing that you're trying to create. And if you click on that, then you can go see that code and how it's done. And that can help you learn how to use this package. And then the other thing you can do, of course, is go out to the reporter website itself. And that has a lot of articles explaining the different functionality of the package and a full function list of all the different functions that are associated with it. So that should get you started if you're interested in learning how to use the reporter package.